Hi, this is Marta from Movie Soup with Spell Juice, and today I am bringing a book haul. I haven't really filmed a book haul in a while, so let's say that this is my summer book haul. The first book that I want to show is a collection of poetry, Slow War by Benjamin Hertwig. This is a poetry collection written by a war veteran. And the reason why I bought this is because not only do I find very personal poetry very interesting, but I also saw that Mr. Hertwig is Canadian. And it's very hard to find books written by Canadian authors in bookstores, so I tend to try and buy one whenever I see one. The second book that I want to show is a novel, Faces in the Crowd by Valerie Louisei. I think that's how you say her name. This is a Mexican author who writes in English. A literary hub and all these high-profile magazines have talked about her with great expectations. And this book hits a lot of buttons for me. It's about a single mother, and I am always on the lookout for more books about single mothers. It takes place in New York. I love any book that takes place in New York. And it's about a woman who is obsessed with a poet from the Harlem Renaissance. And the Harlem Renaissance is one of my favorite things in literary history. I love the authors that sprang from that movement. I just find it like one of the most fascinating moments in American history. So to see actually a book talk about the Harlem Renaissance, I am so thrilled. I also bought Adrian Tomine's latest comic collection. It's called Killing and Dying. You might recognize Adrian Tomine as the author of Shortcomings. And Shortcomings deals with a lot of very unlikable people dealing with race and dating. And it's most certainly not a comic for everyone, but I really liked it. And I've also read his other short story collection called Summer Blonde. And out of the 4 stories in that comic, I liked 2 of them. So I'm hoping that this one might be worthwhile. In May, I was at the Stockholm International Comic Festival. And this year they had a lot of guests from Japan, and the theme was Japan. But they do try to every year have one guest from Finland. And this year they weren't selling that many comics in Finnish. Last year they had a lot more selections of comics in Finnish. But there was one artist who was there, and she actually was selling some of her stuff in the original language. So I bought Hannerina Moisenen's Kannas. This has also been translated into English and into Swedish, and Miss Moisenen has done a art piece and a video installation about this comic, so I'm going to leave the link to that down below. And this is basically a historical comic that takes place during the Second World War in Finland in the Karelia areas, when the Russians have won the war and they're taking Karelia, and Karelia has to be evacuated. And this was a big thing that happened in Finland. About 1 million people in Finland have Karelian descent. So this is a national trauma that has taken place, and it's still talked about. I think I've mentioned on this channel before the poet Eva Kilpi. Then she, for instance, has also written about the Karelian evacuation. And this is one of the newest takes on the incident. Miss Moisenen, as was Eva Kilpi, is also of Karelian descent. So I am very much looking forward to this and seeing what Miss Moisenen's take on this historical event is. I also bought The Kiss Quartet by Helen Hoang. Now, I don't really read romances all that much, but one thing that I kind of feel is a little bit underrepresented and needs to be depicted more often in media and in pop culture is love stories that have people with autism or people that are on the autism spectrum, also formerly known as Asperger's syndrome. And when I was growing up, there were a lot of people that had Asperger's syndrome that were like shown as role models, but very few of them were actually authors. And the few books that I read that had people on the autism spectrum or had Asperger's syndrome, they weren't really own voices. And this is a love story between a woman who has been diagnosed with autism spectrum, and she kind of starts a relationship with a male sex worker because she's kind of trying to figure out how love really works because she doesn't have the social cues for it. And the thing that really excites me is that it is own voices. Helen Huang has talked about on her Goodreads profile that she has been diagnosed with autism spectrum. And I am really excited that there's coming out literature about people on the spectrum that are own voices. I also bought The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner. This is a literary fiction novel that takes place in a women's prison. And I've heard that it is a very critical look at the mass incarnation that's taking place in America. And it talks about all the things that are broken in the criminal system. And I'm always up for a book that makes you think and makes you question things that you've been told. So this is going to be very interesting. I also bought a book that has been translated. This is originally written in Korean, and it is called Wolves by Yeon Sung Tae. I actually literally know nothing about the author of this book. However, I read the back cover and it seems to be a very international collection of stories. There's South Korean characters, there's North Korean characters, there's stories that take place in Mongolia. And Mongolia is one of these countries that when it's talked about in pop culture, then we always just talk about Genghis Khan. But we actually don't really talk about any other time in Mongolia or anything about contemporary Mongolia. And I have actually never read a book by a Mongolian author. And this is written by a Korean author, so it's not own voices. But it does depict modern day Mongolia, and that's always a start. And then the last book that I'm going to talk about that I bought in the past 3 months is Wade into Water by Tracy K. Smith. This is Tracy K. Smith's latest poetry collection. It was just published in May, I believe. And I really liked her collection Life on Mars. I thought it was very provocative and it had really beautiful language and it had very thoughtful poems that really made you feel a lot of emotions. And Wade into Water has been getting a lot of good reviews. Roxane Gay, I think, gave it 4 stars out of 5. And I actually would like to read more of Miss Smith's poetry because I liked Life on Mars so much, but I have not been able to find any of her other collections in bookstores, so I'm going to give this newest one a try. So those were all the books that I have bought in the last 3 months. Have you guys heard of any of these books, or do you have any books that you just bought that you would like to share with me? Comment down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you like this video, click the like button. Subscribe. You could also go visit my Facebook page, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.